Captain Sarah Mitchell had always trusted her instincts. 20 years of flying commercial aircraft had taught her to notice when something wasn't right. As she walked around Flight 447 during her pre-flight inspection that Tuesday morning, a strange metallic smell caught her attention. It wasn't fuel, hydraulic fluid, or any of the usual aircraft odors she knew by heart. The Boeing 737 sat gleaming under the harsh airport lights at Denver International. Sarah ran her experienced hands along the fuselage, checking for any visible damage or irregularities. Everything appeared normal until she reached the cargo hold area. The metallic smell grew stronger, almost overwhelming. She knelt down and noticed something unusual about one of the access panels. The bolts looked newer than the rest, as if they had been recently replaced. Sarah's co-pilot, Jake Reynolds, approached with the flight manifest. "Morning, Captain. We've got 184 passengers today, mostly business travelers heading to Chicago. Weather looks clear all the way. Jake, do you smell anything strange around here?" Sarah asked, still examining the panel. Jake sniffed the air and shrugged. "Smells like airplane to me. You know how these birds can be after sitting overnight." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. She had learned long ago that in aviation, paranoia could save lives. She decided to call for a maintenance check before takeoff. The ground crew chief, Tom Bradley, arrived within minutes. He was a veteran mechanic with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails and eyes that had seen every possible aircraft malfunction. "What's the concern, Captain?" Tom asked, pulling out his tablet. Sarah pointed to the suspicious panel. "This doesn't look right. The bolts are different, and there's an unusual smell coming from this area." Tom examined the panel carefully. After a few minutes, he looked up with a puzzled expression. "You're right about the bolts. They're definitely newer. Let me check the maintenance logs." He scrolled through his tablet for several minutes, his frown deepening. "That's odd. There's no record of any work being done on this panel in the past 6 months. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. In her experience, undocumented maintenance work was always a red flag. Aircraft maintenance was strictly regulated, with every screw and bolt accounted for. "Can you open it up and take a look inside?" Tom hesitated. "That'll delay your departure by at least 30 minutes. The passengers are already boarding." "I don't care about the delay. Open it." Tom retrieved his tools and began removing the bolts. As the panel came free, a stronger wave of that metallic smell escaped. Inside the compartment, among the usual wiring and control systems, was a device that definitely didn't belong. It was about the size of a briefcase with blinking red lights and wires leading to various aircraft systems. "What the hell is that?" Jake whispered, peering over Tom's shoulder. Tom's face went pale. "I've never seen anything like it. This isn't standard equipment." He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "Captain, I think we need to call security immediately." Sarah's mind raced. Whatever this device was, it had been secretly installed on her aircraft. The implications were terrifying. She thought about the 184 passengers settling into their seats, completely unaware of the potential danger. Everyone stepped back. "Don't touch anything else." She called airport security while Tom cordoned off the area with yellow tape. Within minutes, the area was swarming with officials. FBI agents arrived, followed by specialists from the Transportation Security Administration and aircraft manufacturer representatives. The passengers were evacuated, and the plane was quarantined. Agent Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed FBI investigator specializing in aviation security, took charge of the scene. She interviewed Sarah extensively about the discovery. "Captain Mitchell, you may have prevented a catastrophe. This device appears to be designed to interfere with critical flight systems." "What kind of interference?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "We're still analyzing it, but preliminary examination suggests it could cause sudden altitude loss, navigation failure, or complete loss of control. If you hadn't noticed the irregularities, this flight could have ended in disaster." The weight of that statement hit Sarah hard. She had potentially saved 184 lives by trusting her instincts. But as the investigation continued, more disturbing details emerged. The device was sophisticated, clearly the work of professionals. Someone with extensive knowledge of aircraft systems and access to restricted areas had installed it. Agent Santos pulled Sarah aside later that evening. "Captain, we've discovered something else. This isn't an isolated incident. We've found similar devices on 3 other aircraft at different airports across the country. All were scheduled for flights today." Sarah felt sick. This wasn't just about her flight. It was part of something much larger and more sinister. "Do you know who's behind this?" We're still investigating, but we believe it's connected to a terrorist organization that's been trying to infiltrate the aviation industry. The problem is we don't know how many more devices are out there or who's helping them. As Sarah drove home that night, her mind was spinning. She had always known that flying carried risks, but this was different. This was deliberate sabotage on a massive scale. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. It was an unknown number. Captain Mitchell? The voice was cold, mechanical, clearly disguised. Who is this? You interfered with something that wasn't your concern. That was a mistake. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you want? You've seen something you shouldn't have. You know something you shouldn't know. Unless you want your family to suffer the consequences, you'll forget what happened today. Stop cooperating with the investigation. Walk away. The line went dead. Sarah sat in her car, hands trembling. Through her living room window, she could see her husband David reading to their 10-year-old daughter Emma. They were her world, and now they were in danger because she had done the right thing. But Sarah Mitchell hadn't survived 20 years in aviation by backing down from danger. She knew that whoever was behind this couldn't be allowed to continue. Too many innocent lives were at stake. As she walked toward her front door, she made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to run, and she wasn't going to stay quiet. The real fight was just beginning. Sarah barely slept that night. Every sound outside her house made her jump. She checked on Emma 3 times, making sure the windows were locked and the security system was armed. David sensed something was wrong but didn't push when she claimed it was just work stress. How could she explain that their lives might be in danger because she had discovered a terrorist plot? The next morning, Sarah arrived at the airport 2 hours early. She wanted to speak with Agent Santos before her scheduled flight to Miami. The FBI had set up a temporary command center in an unused terminal building. When Sarah walked in, she found Santos staring at a wall covered with photos, diagrams, and flight schedules. Captain Mitchell, I was hoping you'd come in. We've made some disturbing discoveries overnight. Santos led her to a conference table covered with evidence photos. We've analyzed the device you found. It's incredibly sophisticated, designed to activate during flight and cause what would appear to be mechanical failure. The scary part is how targeted this attack was. What do you mean targeted? All 4 flights with these devices were scheduled to carry high-value passengers. Government officials, business leaders, scientists working on classified projects. Your flight yesterday was supposed to carry Senator Williams, who chairs the Homeland Security Committee. Sarah's stomach dropped. Senator Williams wasn't on my passenger list. That's because he canceled at the last minute due to a family emergency. If he had been on board... Santos didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah studied the photos of the device. How many people would have access to install something like this? That's what worries us. This required inside help, someone with security clearance, access to restricted areas, and detailed knowledge of aircraft systems. We're looking at everyone from mechanics to security personnel to catering staff. Agent Santos pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah surveillance footage from various airports. We've identified some suspicious activity, but nothing concrete yet. The problem is, we don't know how deep this conspiracy goes or how many people are involved. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Last warning. Your daughter's school is very nice. Would hate for anything to happen there. Her blood turned to ice. They know about Emma. Santos immediately alerted her team. Within minutes, FBI agents were dispatched to Emma's school, and Sarah was calling David to warn him. Her husband's voice was tight with controlled panic as he agreed to pick up Emma immediately and take her to his sister's house in Colorado Springs. Captain, we can put you and your family in protective custody, Santos offered. Sarah shook her head. Running won't solve this. These people will just find other pilots to threaten or kill. We need to catch them. That's admirable, but it's also dangerous. We don't know how many people are involved in this conspiracy. Before Sarah could respond, Santos received an urgent call. After a brief conversation, she hung up with a grim expression. There's been another incident. A Delta flight from Atlanta to New York experienced sudden system failures 20 minutes after takeoff. The pilots managed an emergency landing, but barely. Was there a device? They're checking now. But Captain, the pilot who discovered it was found dead in his hotel room this morning. Apparent suicide, according to local police. The implication was clear. Sarah wasn't just dealing with terrorists. She was dealing with people willing to eliminate anyone who threatened their operation. I'm not backing down. Then we need to be smart about this. We believe the next target is your flight to Miami this afternoon. We've swept the aircraft thoroughly, but we want you to fly it." Sarah stared at her. "You want me to use myself as bait?" "Not just you. We'll have undercover agents on board and we'll be monitoring everything. If they try anything, we'll be ready. But we need someone they trust to be in the cockpit. Someone who appears to be cooperating with their demands." The plan was risky, but Sarah understood the logic. If the terrorists thought she was backing down, they might reveal themselves or provide clues about the larger conspiracy. "What about my crew?" "Jake Reynolds has agreed to fly with you. He's been briefed on the situation. The flight attendants will be a mix of airline personnel and undercover agents." 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the cockpit of Flight 892, preparing for what could be her last flight. The plane had been thoroughly inspected, every system checked and double-checked, but she knew that didn't guarantee safety. If the conspiracy was as deep as Santos suggested, the danger could come from anywhere. As passengers boarded, Sarah watched carefully. Were any of them connected to the plot? That businessman in first class who seemed nervous, or the woman traveling alone who kept checking her phone? The flight manifest showed 167 passengers, but Sarah wondered how many were exactly who they claimed to be. Jake entered the cockpit with the final paperwork. "You sure about this, Sarah? It's not too late to call in sick, I'm sure. These people can't be allowed to continue." During the safety demonstration, Sarah noticed one of the flight attendants she didn't recognize. Agent Santos had told her there would be undercover personnel on board, but not knowing exactly who they were made her even more nervous. Every face could be friend or enemy. As they taxied toward the runway, Sarah's phone received one final text. "You made the wrong choice. Say goodbye to your family." Her hands tightened on the controls. Whatever happened next, she was committed to seeing this through. The tower cleared them for takeoff, and Sarah pushed the throttles forward. Flight 892 lifted into the clear afternoon sky, carrying a plane full of passengers into an uncertain fate. 30 minutes into the flight, at cruising altitude, the first warning light appeared on Sarah's instrument panel, then another. Jake looked at the displays with growing alarm. "Sarah, we're losing hydraulic pressure," but this time Sarah was ready. She knew this wasn't mechanical failure. The real test was just beginning. Sarah's training kicked in as more warning lights illuminated the cockpit. Years of experience had taught her to remain calm during emergencies, but this was different. She knew these system failures weren't random mechanical problems. Someone was deliberately trying to bring down her aircraft. "Jake, run the emergency checklist for hydraulic failure," she instructed while mentally cataloging which systems were still functioning normally. The plane was still controllable, but barely. She could feel the aircraft becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Jake's fingers flew over the controls, following emergency procedures they had practiced countless times in simulators. Primary hydraulics are completely gone. Secondary system is fluctuating. "We're operating on backup power alone." Sarah maintained her composure while speaking to air traffic control. "Miami Center, this is United 892. We have multiple system failures and need priority vectors to the nearest suitable airport." "United 892, understand you have an emergency. Turn right heading 180. Descend and maintain 15,000 feet. Jacksonville International is 85 miles southeast of your position." As Sarah began the turn, she felt the aircraft respond sluggishly. Fighting against compromised controls, she managed to start the descent. But then her worst fears were realized. The backup flight management system began displaying erratic readings. Altitude indicators showed conflicting information, and the navigation system started providing false position data. "This isn't random system failure," Sarah told Jake quietly. "Someone is actively interfering with our aircraft systems." Jake's face paled as he understood the implications. "Remote access to flight controls? It's possible. The device we found yesterday might have been just one part of a larger system." Sarah switched to manual control, relying on her basic flying skills rather than the aircraft's automated systems. "We can't trust any of the electronic displays." In the passenger cabin, people were beginning to notice the unusual flight behavior. Sarah could hear concerned voices through the cockpit door. The undercover FBI agents would be trying to maintain calm while staying alert for any suspicious passenger behavior. Agent Santos, monitoring the flight from the FBI command center, watched radar displays with growing concern. Flight 892's transponder signal was becoming intermittent, and the aircraft's flight path was deviating from normal patterns. She opened a secure communication channel with Sarah. Captain Mitchell, we're seeing irregular flight behavior on radar. What's your status? Sarah activated her throat microphone for the secure channel. Multiple system failures that appear to be externally controlled. We're flying on basic manual controls only. Navigation and altitude systems are compromised. We have fighter escorts en route to your position. They'll provide visual navigation assistance if needed. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sarah felt the aircraft shudder as someone remotely attempted to adjust the engine power settings. She quickly switched to manual engine control, cutting off the electronic interface that was allowing external manipulation. Jake, I need you to go back into the cabin and identify any passenger who might be operating electronic equipment. Don't be obvious about it, but look for anything that could be transmitting signals to our aircraft systems. Jake unbuckled his harness. What about flying the plane? I can handle it alone. We need to find the source of this interference. As Jake left the cockpit, Sarah focused entirely on keeping the aircraft stable. Without reliable instruments, she had to rely on visual references and her gut instincts. Through the cockpit windows, she could see two F-16 fighter jets approaching from different directions. The lead fighter pilot's voice came through her radio. United 892, this is Colonel Harris with Falcon Flight. We have you in visual contact. You appear to be in controlled flight, but your transponder signal is erratic. Colonel Harris, our electronic systems are being externally manipulated. We need visual navigation assistance to Jacksonville. Copy that. We'll escort you in. Follow my lead aircraft. Sarah felt a moment of relief knowing that military pilots were now helping guide her aircraft. But her relief was short-lived. The interference with her aircraft system suddenly intensified. The engine controls began operating independently, alternately increasing and decreasing power in a pattern clearly designed to make the aircraft uncontrollable. She fought against the electronic sabotage, manually overriding every attempt to destabilize the aircraft. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she wrestled with controls that seemed to have a mind of their own. The plane bucked and rolled as conflicting electronic commands battled against her manual inputs. Jake returned to the cockpit with disturbing news. Sarah, I found 3 passengers with sophisticated electronic equipment. One claimed to be a video game developer. Another said he was testing network security software. The third wouldn't explain what he was doing. Are the FBI agents watching them? 2 of them are being quietly detained. The third disappeared into the restroom and hasn't come out. Sarah made a split-second decision. Tell the flight attendants to break down that restroom door. I don't care if it causes panic. We need to stop whatever that person is doing. Through her headphones, Sarah heard the sounds of commotion in the passenger cabin, shouts, running footsteps, and then a loud crash as the restroom door was forced open. A few moments later, Jake reported back through the secure channel. They found a woman with a briefcase full of electronic equipment. She had a direct interface device that was sending commands to aircraft systems through the passenger entertainment network. The FBI agents have her in custody now. Immediately, Sarah felt the aircraft system stabilize. The engine controls stopped fighting against her inputs, and the navigation displays began showing consistent readings again. But they weren't out of danger yet. The damaged hydraulic systems were still compromised, and landing would be extremely challenging. Colonel Harris guided Sarah toward Jacksonville International Airport, providing constant updates on wind conditions and runway status. Emergency crews were standing by, and the airport had cleared all other traffic to give Flight 892 priority. United 892, you're cleared for emergency landing runways 08 right. Wind is 090 at 12 knots. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Sarah began the most difficult approach of her career. With limited hydraulic power and damaged flight controls, every movement required maximum concentration. The aircraft felt heavy and unresponsive, but she managed to maintain a stable descent path. As the runway came into view, Sarah realized her greatest challenge was still ahead. Landing a damaged aircraft with 167 passengers on board would test every skill she had learned in 2 decades of flying. But she also knew that successfully completing this landing would provide crucial evidence about who was behind the conspiracy and how they had nearly succeeded in their deadly plot. Sarah lined up Flight 892 with the runway centerline, fighting against damaged flight controls that made every adjustment feel like moving through thick mud. The aircraft wanted to drift left, requiring constant correction. She could see the emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, their flashing lights creating an almost surreal scene in the afternoon sunlight. Jake, give me full flaps and prepare for emergency evacuation procedures, Sarah commanded. Her voice steady despite the chaos of the past hour. Flaps deployed. All emergency systems are armed, Jake replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the runway approach. The landing was harder than Sarah intended, but the aircraft held together. She immediately deployed the reverse thrusters and applied maximum braking. The plane shuddered and groaned as it decelerated, finally coming to a stop about halfway down the runway. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have landed safely in Jacksonville. Please remain seated while emergency personnel inspect the aircraft. Within minutes, FBI agents boarded the plane and took the 3 suspects into custody. Agent Santos arrived on scene shortly after, coordinating with local authorities and aircraft investigators. Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe as passengers were safely evacuated through emergency slides. Captain, you've just provided us with the biggest break in this investigation, Santos told her as they watched the suspects being led away in handcuffs. The woman with the electronic equipment is Dr. Melissa Chen, a former aerospace engineer who disappeared from a defense contractor 6 months ago. Sarah studied the woman being placed in a police vehicle. She appeared to be in her 30s, professionally dressed, and showed no signs of the typical nervousness associated with captured criminals. She doesn't look like a terrorist. That's what makes her dangerous. Dr. Chen helped design some of the electronic systems that control modern aircraft. She knew exactly how to exploit vulnerabilities in the flight management computers. As aircraft investigators examined Flight 892, they discovered the full extent of the sabotage. Hidden transmitters had been installed in the passenger entertainment system, allowing remote access to critical aircraft systems. The sophistication of the attack was beyond anything aviation security had previously encountered. This required months of planning, explained Tom Bradley, the same maintenance chief who had helped Sarah discover the first device. Someone with intimate knowledge of aircraft systems and access to restricted technical specifications. Agent Santos received a phone call that made her expression darken. After hanging up, she pulled Sarah aside. We have a problem. Dr. Chen isn't talking, but we've discovered that this conspiracy goes much deeper than we thought. She was working for a group that has infiltrated multiple airlines and aircraft manufacturers. How many more people are involved? We don't know yet, but we've identified at least 12 suspicious individuals across 6 different airports. Some are mechanics, others are security personnel, and a few are actually pilots. The implications were staggering. Sarah realized that her discovery of the first device had exposed just the tip of a massive conspiracy to sabotage commercial aviation. What's their endgame? We're still trying to figure that out. But based on the targeting of specific flights carrying government officials and defense contractors, we believe they're trying to disrupt critical national security operations. As evening approached, Sarah was debriefed by multiple agencies, FBI, TSA, FAA, and even representatives from the Department of Defense, interviewed her extensively about every detail of the past 2 days. Her phone rang constantly with calls from news media, but Santos advised her to avoid speaking with reporters until the investigation was complete. Finally, alone in a hotel room near Jacksonville Airport, Sarah called David. Her family was safe at his sister's house in Colorado Springs, but she knew they couldn't hide forever. Sarah, are you okay? We saw the news about your emergency landing. David's voice was filled with worry. I'm fine, but this isn't over. The people behind this are still out there, and they know I'm the one who exposed them. What does that mean for us? Sarah stared out the hotel window at the airport where Flight 892 sat surrounded by investigators. It means we're going to have to be very careful for a while. The FBI thinks this conspiracy involves dozens of people, maybe more. After hanging up, Sarah tried to process everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she had been a routine airline pilot with a predictable schedule. Now she was at the center of a terrorism investigation that could reshape aviation security forever. Her phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. You think you've won? But this is just the beginning. We know where your family is hiding. Sarah immediately called Agent Santos, who assured her that FBI protection for her family would be increased. But Sarah knew that hiding wasn't a long-term solution. The only way to truly end the threat was to completely expose the conspiracy. Agent Santos, I want to help you catch the rest of them. Captain, you've already done more than enough. These people have proven they're willing to kill. That's exactly why I need to help. If I don't, they'll just find other ways to attack aircraft and kill innocent passengers. Santos was quiet for a moment. What did you have in mind? They think they've silenced me with threats against my family. Let me pretend to cooperate with them. Maybe I can draw them out. That's incredibly dangerous. We don't know how many people are involved or how they communicate with each other. Sarah had made up her mind. Sometimes being a pilot means taking calculated risks to protect passengers. This is no different. The next morning, Sarah received instructions to return to Denver and resume normal flight operations. Publicly, the airline and FBI were downplaying the significance of the incident, describing it as an isolated case of attempted sabotage that had been quickly resolved. But Sarah knew better. As she prepared to board a commercial flight back to Denver, she understood that she was walking into the most dangerous phase of her career. The real conspirators were still out there, and they would be watching her every move. The woman who had accidentally uncovered a lethal aircraft secret was now deliberately placing herself in the crosshairs of a ruthless enemy. Her next flight would determine whether she could help the FBI catch the remaining conspirators, or whether she would become their next victim. 3 days after the emergency landing in Jacksonville, Sarah returned to Denver International Airport. The FBI had arranged for her to resume flight operations while secretly gathering intelligence about the remaining conspirators. She wore a concealed recording device and had memorized coded phrases to communicate with undercover agents positioned throughout the airport. As she walked through the terminal, Sarah noticed several faces she didn't recognize in areas typically restricted to airline personnel. Some could be additional FBI agents, but others might be conspirators watching her movements. The paranoia was exhausting, but she knew it was necessary. Her first flight back was scheduled to Los Angeles, a routine 3-hour journey that would normally be unremarkable. But Agent Santos had briefed her that intelligence suggested the conspirators planned to test her cooperation during this flight. They wanted to see if she would report any suspicious activity, or if she had truly been intimidated into silence. Jake Reynolds was again assigned as her co-pilot, providing some comfort in an otherwise tense situation. During the pre-flight inspection, they both carefully examined every accessible component of the aircraft. The plane appeared normal, but Sarah had learned not to trust appearances. "Anything unusual in the maintenance logs?" Sarah asked Tom Bradley, who was personally overseeing the inspection. "Everything checks out clean, but we've installed some additional monitoring equipment that will detect any unauthorized signals trying to interface with aircraft systems." Sarah nodded and continued her inspection. As she rounded the nose of the aircraft, a maintenance worker she didn't recognize approached her. He was wearing proper credentials and airport identification, but something about his demeanor seemed off. "Captain Mitchell, I need to show you something in the avionics bay. We found a potential issue during our inspection." Sarah's instincts immediately went on high alert. What kind of issue? Possibly some loose wiring that could affect the navigation system. "It'll just take a minute to show you." Every alarm bell in Sarah's head was ringing. She knew from the FBI briefings that the conspirators would likely try to lure her into an isolated area. "I'll get our maintenance supervisor to look at it with us." The man's expression shifted slightly. "Actually, it's probably nothing serious. I can handle it myself. No, I insist. Safety protocols require supervision for any avionics work." The man quickly walked away, disappearing into the crowd of ground personnel. Sarah immediately activated her concealed radio to alert the FBI surveillance team. Within minutes, agents were searching the area, but the suspicious maintenance worker had vanished. "Captain, we reviewed his credentials," Agent Santos informed her through the secure channel. "The ID badge was stolen from an employee who called in sick today. We're dealing with someone who has detailed knowledge of airport security procedures." Sarah continued her pre-flight inspection with heightened awareness. If the conspirators were bold enough to approach her directly, it meant they were getting desperate. That desperation made them more dangerous but also more likely to make mistakes. During boarding, Sarah noticed a passenger who seemed overly interested in the cockpit area. He was traveling in first class, well-dressed, and appeared to be a typical business traveler. But he had positioned himself where he could observe the cockpit door and was paying unusually close attention to the crew's movements. "Jake, do you see the gentleman in seat 2A? The one with the gray suit and laptop?" Jake discreetly observed the passenger. "What about him?" "He's been watching us since boarding started. Check with the flight attendants to see if he's done anything unusual." The lead flight attendant, Maria Santos, no relation to the FBI agent, reported back that the passenger had asked several detailed questions about flight procedures, and had specifically inquired about cockpit security measures. She had found his questions odd but not threatening. As they pushed back from the gate, Sarah's secure radio crackled with an urgent message from Agent Santos. "Captain, we've identified the passenger in 2A. Robert Hayes, former military electronics specialist who was discharged under suspicious circumstances 3 years ago. He's been linked to several defense contractor security breaches." Sarah's blood pressure spiked. She was trapped in an aircraft with a known conspirator and 189 other passengers who had no idea they were in danger. "What are your instructions?" "Continue with the flight as planned. We have agents on board, and we're monitoring all electronic communications. If he tries anything, we'll be ready." The takeoff proceeded normally, but Sarah remained hypervigilant. Every system check, every radio communication, every minor fluctuation in the aircraft's behavior was scrutinized for signs of sabotage. The flight to Los Angeles would take 3 hours. Plenty of time for Hayes to implement whatever plan he had in mind. 45 minutes into the flight, while cruising at 37,000 feet, Sarah noticed Hayes get up from his seat and walk toward the rear of the aircraft. Through the cockpit door security camera, she watched him enter the restroom, but he didn't come out for nearly 10 minutes. "Maria, can you check on the passenger in the aft restroom? He's been in there a long time." Maria knocked on the restroom door and received a response that everything was fine, but when Hayes finally emerged, he was carrying a small electronic device that hadn't been visible before. Sarah's secure radio activated immediately. "Captain, our surveillance equipment is detecting new electronic emissions from the passenger cabin. Someone just activated a powerful transmitter." Sarah felt the familiar chill of recognition. Hayes was attempting to interfere with aircraft systems just as Dr. Chen had done on the previous flight, but this time they were prepared. "Jake, switch all systems to manual override. Cut off any electronic interfaces that could be remotely accessed." Jake's hands moved quickly across the control panel, isolating critical systems from external interference. "All automated systems are now offline. We're flying completely manual." But Hayes had learned from Dr. Chen's capture. Instead of trying to remotely control the aircraft, he had activated a different type of device. Sarah's instruments began displaying false information, showing incorrect altitude, airspeed, and heading. The goal wasn't to crash the aircraft directly, but to confuse the pilots and cause them to make fatal mistakes. "This is psychological warfare," Sarah realized. "He's trying to make us distrust our own instruments and make errors in judgment." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment and focused on the physical sensations of flight. The aircraft felt stable. The engines sounded normal and the controls responded as expected. She opened her eyes and began flying entirely by feel and visual references, ignoring the compromised electronic displays. "Jake, contact air traffic control using the backup radio. Tell them we're experiencing navigation equipment failure and need ground-based radar guidance." As Jake established communication with ATC, Sarah heard commotion in the passenger cabin. The undercover FBI agents were moving to apprehend Hayes, but he had barricaded himself in the galley area and was threatening to activate additional devices. The next few minutes would determine whether Sarah could safely land the aircraft or whether Hayes would succeed in causing the catastrophe that the conspiracy had been planning for months. Sarah could hear the confrontation escalating in the passenger cabin through her headset. Hayes had positioned himself behind the galley counter with what appeared to be a dead man's switch, threatening to activate additional sabotage devices if anyone approached him. "This is Agent Rodriguez," came the voice through her secure channel. "The suspect claims to have explosive devices that will trigger if we attempt to detain him. We're treating this as a credible threat." Sarah's mind raced through her options. She was flying blind with compromised instruments, had a terrorist barricaded in her passenger cabin, and was responsible for 189 innocent lives. But 20 years of aviation experience had prepared her for exactly this type of crisis decision-making. "Jake, how much fuel do we have remaining?" "About 90 minutes at current consumption rates. Contact Los Angeles approach and declare an emergency. Tell them we need priority landing clearance and have law enforcement standing by." As Jake communicated with air traffic control, Sarah began a careful descent using only visual references and her instinctive feel for the aircraft. The compromised navigation instruments showed wildly conflicting information, but she trusted her experience more than the electronic displays. Hayes's voice suddenly came over the passenger address system. Captain Mitchell, I know you can hear me. You should have stayed quiet about what you discovered. Now everyone on this aircraft will pay the price for your interference. Sarah activated the PA system to respond. Mr. Hayes, whatever grievances you have are with me, not these passengers. Let's discuss this calmly. There's nothing to discuss. You destroyed months of careful planning when you found that device in Denver. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused to our operation? Through her secure channel, Agent Santos was providing real-time intelligence. Captain, we've been analyzing Hayes's background. He's not just a hired saboteur. His brother was killed in a military contractor incident 3 years ago, and he blames the aviation industry for covering up safety violations. Sarah began to understand Hayes's motivation. This wasn't just terrorism, it was a personal vendetta against the aviation industry. Mr. Hayes, I understand you've lost someone important to you, but killing innocent passengers won't bring justice for your brother. Justice? Hayes laughed bitterly. The same industry that covered up my brother's death wants to talk about justice? These passengers work for the same companies that prioritize profits over safety. Sarah realized she needed to approach this differently. Hayes wasn't a professional terrorist. He was a grieving brother who had been manipulated into joining a larger conspiracy. What happened to your brother? There was a long pause before Hayes responded. He was a test pilot for Meridian Aerospace. They knew their new navigation system had fatal flaws, but they covered it up to win a military contract. David died when the system failed during a test flight. Sarah felt a surge of empathy despite the danger. She had known several test pilots who had died in experimental aircraft, and she understood the pain of losing someone to aviation accidents. I'm sorry for your loss, but these passengers aren't responsible for your brother's death. They're part of the system that killed him. Agent Rodriguez's voice came through the secure channel. Captain, our negotiators are trying to establish direct communication with Hayes. Keep him talking as long as possible. Sarah continued her descent while maintaining the conversation. Mr. Hayes, if you really want justice for your brother, destroying this aircraft won't accomplish that. It will just create more grieving families like yours. Los Angeles Approach Control guided Sarah toward the airport using ground-based radar. Without reliable instruments, she had to trust the air traffic controllers completely. The aircraft was stable, but she knew that landing would be extremely challenging without accurate altitude and airspeed indicators. United 447, you're 15 miles from runway 24 right. Descend to 3,000 feet and turn left heading 240. Sarah followed the instructions while continuing to engage Hayes in conversation. Through her peripheral vision, she could see Jake monitoring their approach path and fuel consumption. They would have only one chance to land safely. Mr. Hayes, I've lost friends in aviation accidents too, but I've also seen how this industry learns from mistakes and improves safety for everyone. Your brother's death wasn't meaningless if it led to better safety protocols. You don't understand. Meridian covered up the investigation. They bribed officials and destroyed evidence. My brother died for nothing. Agent Santos's voice provided crucial intelligence. Captain, we've been investigating Hayes's claims about Meridian Aerospace. There's evidence that he's right about the cover-up. His brother's death was indeed caused by a known navigation system flaw. This information changed everything for Sarah. Hayes wasn't just a terrorist. He was someone seeking justice for a real crime. Mr. Hayes, if what you're saying is true, then we need to expose the truth, not destroy evidence by crashing this aircraft. It's too late for truth. No one will listen. That's not true. The FBI investigation into this conspiracy has already uncovered evidence of corruption in multiple aerospace companies. Your brother's case could finally get the attention it deserves. Sarah could see the runway approaching through the cockpit windows. She had to time this conversation perfectly, keeping Hayes distracted while executing the most difficult landing of her career. United 447, you're 5 miles from touchdown. Winds are calm, runway is clear. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Sarah began her final approach, relying entirely on visual cues and her experience. The aircraft felt heavy and sluggish, but she maintained control. Mr. Hayes, help me land this aircraft safely, and I promise the FBI will investigate your brother's death properly. There was a long silence. Then Hayes's voice came over the intercom, much quieter now. You really think they'll listen? I guarantee it. Agent Santos is already pulling files on Meridian Aerospace. As the runway threshold passed beneath them, Sarah executed a perfect touchdown despite the compromised instruments. The aircraft rolled to a stop as emergency vehicles surrounded them. Hayes finally surrendered to the FBI agents, handing over his electronic devices without resistance. Later, as passengers were evacuated and Hayes was taken into custody, Agent Santos approached Sarah. Captain, Hayes provided us with evidence about his brother's death and the larger conspiracy. It appears he was recruited by people who promised to help expose aviation industry corruption, but they were actually using his grief for their own terrorist agenda. What happens now? We've arrested 15 more suspects across the country. The conspiracy involved former aerospace employees, disgruntled military personnel, and foreign agents trying to destabilize American aviation. Your discovery of that first device led us to the entire network. Sarah looked out at the aircraft she had just landed safely. And Hayes? He'll face charges for his actions today, but his cooperation in exposing the corruption at Meridian Aerospace might help with his sentencing. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. 6 months later, Sarah returned to routine flight operations. The aviation industry had implemented new security protocols based on the investigation she had initiated. Hayes was serving a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony that led to criminal charges against executives at Meridian Aerospace. Most importantly, David Hayes had finally received justice for his brother's death, and the aviation industry was safer because one pilot had trusted her instincts and refused to be intimidated. Sarah had discovered that sometimes the most dangerous flight is the one where you choose to do what's right, regardless of the personal cost. The woman who had unmasked a lethal aircraft secret had not only saved hundreds of lives but had helped expose a conspiracy that threatened the entire aviation industry. Her courage under fire had proven that sometimes a single person's integrity can make all the difference between catastrophe and justice.